Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Welcome to our 19th installment in the Torah portion of the week, Parshas Terumah. It's talking about the building of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. So the beginning of the Parsha, the Torah here says that, the beginning in chapter 25, it says, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel, let them take for me a portion, that's how they translate Terumah, take for me a portion from every man whose heart motivates him. You shall take my portion. So there's so the Torah says that the building of the Mishkan, how is the Mishkan actually, how are they going to get the raw materials, how are they going to get the money in order for the Mishkan to be built? They're going to get it from donations. So people are going to give, of themselves, however much they can give, and the Torah goes into great detail, as we'll see in the next number of parshas, of how the Mishkan was built, and how many beams, and how many loops, and all this stuff that put the Mishkan together, and the stuff made out of gold, made out of silver, made out of copper. Right? So you're going to need money in order to build this. So the Torah says you should take Terumah. You should take Terumah. You should take a portion from people, right? You should take a portion from every man whose heart motivates him, right? So we'll see what it means to take from each person and what it means for the heart to motivate. That you're gonna take it from someone whose heart motivates him. So says Mori Rabbi Ravagon Ramosha Star Moshlita should be well. He says first thing is a strange language. The language over here is v'yikchu li Terumah. Take for me. The word v'yikach, the root of the word is lamed kuf ches. Lamed kuf ches, lakach means to take. Right, even in modern Hebrew, it means to take. But here, so he asks the question, why does it use the language of vayikchu? Why does it use the language of to take? The normal language would have been latate, right? That you should give, not that you should take for me, but you should give to me, right? If a person gives charity, we don't say you take charity from him. Well, some people actually may feel that way because the reality is, they don't really necessarily want to give. But even though there is an obligation that, to give charity, either 10% after taxes or even up to 20%, you're not allowed to get, Jews not allowed to give anymore, because if he gives too much, then he may come on to people he may need help because he can't afford to do it. Be that as it may, if a person gives charity, they take from him, that's true, right? And he has to dig in his pocket or write a check or whatever the case is. But he wants to give. They take, he gives. Not that. So what does the Torah here say? It says, take for me. Why does it say give to me instead of take? So Rebbe here wants to say that when a person gives charity, what's the purpose of giving charity? Is that if you have to give, and God has blessed you with money, however much you have, you give, right? You give to worthy causes to help others, whether it's poor people, whether it's Torah institutions, help support a Torah scholar, whatever it is, charity goes to them, it helps them, makes you feel good. Why? Because you're giving of your own, and you're giving to someone who needs help, right? So the Talmud tells the story. Tornus Rufus asks Rabbi Akiva, one of the Roman legions, asks Rabbi Akiva. He says, why do your people have poor? Why do there poor people amongst your people? If your God can really provide for everybody, why are there poor people? So Rabbi Akiva answered, in order to give others the merit to help them, right? Otherwise, if you had money and you didn't help others, it might be held against you, in the next world. If you had, then you didn't give, and you didn't help, right? It saves people from Gehenna, saves them from hell. Why? Because charity is a tremendous thing. Charity gives us the ability to help others, as we mentioned. But people don't necessarily want to pick their hand, put it in their pocket, in order to do that. Why? Because they'll come up with a million excuses why they don't have to. I worked hard. I worked 20 hours a day, 15 hours a day. I came up with these great ideas. And, so let this other person get a better job. Let him, retrain. Let him do, other things or whatever the case is. Why should my hard-earned money go to help someone else? So we may think that in the back of our mind, although it's forbidden to think such a thing. Nonetheless, if God's given us a gift and He's helped us, we should help others. Right? Also makes the person feel good doing it. Not just I have an obligation to give, but seeing that it helps somebody else. All the more so if it's not going to administration costs, right? But it's going actually to the poor person, to the institution or the people that need it. So that's a tremendous thing. So when a person gives, not only does he honor God, but he gets a certain level of spiritual holiness from Him. Because you're taking from yourself and you're giving to someone else. So, what does it do? It makes a person holier. Now, again, how much a person gives is going to depend on their ability to give. If a person has a lot of money, he's got to give, 10%. So a person making millions of dollars, a lot of money. Right? If he's making significant money, even if he only gets 10%, right? It's still a significant amount of money. He doesn't have to just give to one person. The Rambam says that the highest level is to give a little bit to a lot of different people. So if you have a lot of money, you split it up. You don't just give one big chunk, and that's it. You don't give any more. The more times you give, right, the more merit that you get. Now, what about someone who doesn't have so much money? So if he gives more compared to the money that he has, that's looked at as praiseworthy. Right? He'll have a better share than someone who's rich. Because someone who's rich, you write a check, $1,000, $5,000, and he's making millions. It doesn't make a dent. Right? It's not going to make a dent in him. So it's easy for them to give because they don't feel it. But for somebody who's squeaking by, or barely squeaking by, and he gives $50, that's a tremendous thing. That for a rich person would be giving $30,000 or more. So it'll depend on on what a person has and what they're able to give. But even someone who can't give as much, but he gives as much as he can, and a rich person gives much less, so he look better. Right? The person who gives less, but he gives more of what he has, so then that's definitely much more praiseworthy. So the Torah then says, we'll see the second part of the verse. The Torah then says, you should take from every man whose heart motivates. Now, someone who gives and wants to help someone else, at whatever level and however much, he's giving with a full heart, hopefully. If sometimes people live in a community, right, especially outside of Israel, and let's say it comes a Sunday, and, one person comes, second person comes, third person comes, after the fourth, fifth, sixth person comes, collecting for whatever they're collecting for. Now, in such a case, if a person has a certain amount to give, so, he'll give a certain amount and that's it. But, after a while, it can get a little bit monotonous. Someone comes has to marry off a child, someone's got a sickness, someone has, whatever it is, that they are collecting for. Keep in mind, a person has to give, and he should give with a happy face. He should have the honor to be able to give, to help, right? Because, if he didn't have money, then he couldn't help, right? If he wasn't making enough money, he couldn't give. So even if he doesn't give as much, he should give whatever he can. But, again, sometimes the Eitzah comes. Evil inclination comes in. And after a number of people come, during the day, and you're sort of getting bothered by this, so to speak, Then finally, like the fifth, sixth person comes and says, okay, here, goodbye, right? And you give them without a happy face, sort of grumpily, give him the check, send him on his way. You don't even get the mitzvah for that, right? So there are levels of what a person can give and how they can give. A person can get upstairs after 120 years. God's going to say, sorry to say, it looks like you didn't give that much in charity. And you had so much money. He goes, what are you talking about? I gave this amount and I gave that amount. And, God plays back the movie and shows him all the money that he gave. So the man says, look, I gave all this. Why don't I get credit? So God says, okay, let's play the video in slow motion. Dun, dun, dun. No smile. Anger. Scowl when he gives the money. Sorry, you don't get credit for that. But I gave. At the end of the day, I gave. Doesn't matter. If you give with a sour face, it's as if you didn't give it all. So there are levels here. Also, an interesting idea. We'll get back to the 1 second. It reminds me of an idea that when a person has the ability to give, if he doesn't give, right? So obviously that's bad. If he gives with a sour face, right? He doesn't get credit. But here he did the mitzvah. He gave charity. Here it says, you should do it for me. As the commentaries learn out, for my sake, i.e., it should be done lishma. Lishma means for its own sake. Literally for the sake of its name. But here it means for its own sake. So if a person comes collecting, it doesn't matter what he's collecting for. And you give him money, however much money, doesn't matter. Whatever money he gives, he's done the mitzvah. Matzah, he makes the blessing. 14th of Nisan, at night. He makes the blessing, he eats the matzah. He got the mitzvah. Don't need special intention. Right, we have to understand what the matzah is, what it represents. But we're not talking specific intention. He's thinking about something else, but he's eating matzah. Lamaisa, practically speaking, he's eating matzah. Does he get credit for eating matzah? He ate it. Can't take it away, he ate it. So a person comes and he gives money. What in the world does it say? I have to do it for seemingly lishma, for its own sake. I did the mitzvah. Here's the money, he takes it, mitzvah done. If the mitzvah's done, I don't need special intention. So Rashi over here says, no, it has to be for his sake. Right? You don't see such a thing. Right? Once it's given, it's given. So for his sake, as Rabbi here points out, right, so now we'll come back. What does it mean for his sake? For his sake means that I do it and it brings honor to him. Because this is something hard. As we mentioned, somebody who earns money, makes money, does whatever, however they have money, and they're giving to someone else, and they want to help someone else. That's not an easy thing to do. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, plays havoc here. Because we could justify a million times why a person shouldn't do it. Right? Why we shouldn't give. Forget how much we're going to give. We shouldn't give it all. Person comes, what are you doing? I have to marry off my kids. Well, like, what do you want from me? I also have to marry off kids. So why should it be that, you can't afford to marry off kids? And I should have to help you. Get a better job. Do something. We can justify it, potentially, in a lot of different ways. But the reality is, if we give at whatever level, that is going to do something for our soul. Because when we give, we're giving of ourselves. Doesn't matter how much money you have. You give of yourself. Even a rich person writes a check. He's giving. He doesn't have to. But he's motivated to give. So it says over here, the motivation is that God says, I want money to build a place where I'm going to come down, which we'll see what that means. Hopefully we'll get there. We'll see what that means. God's going to come to this earth and put himself in a box, so to speak. What the tabernacle was is what the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, became. Be that as it may, God says, I want the raw materials to be paid for by people who have a generous heart. Yeah, there's a mitzvah to give tzedakah, but I'm not interested in people who think they're forced to give it. If they think they're forced to do it and they're not giving with an open heart, I'm not interested. That money I could care less. Right? Let it go to save the whales. Let it go to let someone leave it to a dog or who knows what. I should use that money for my sanctuary. My presence is going to be shown in the world. And you could care less about giving. You say, okay, fine, I'll give. It's a mitzvah, I'll give. Okay. You don't have a full heart. You got a crummy heart. Because you don't want to give. But you give because, it's a mitzvah to give. Otherwise, fry in hell forever. If I don't do the mitzvah, that's the way to keep Torah. Yeah, we'll keep Torah because if we don't, we're going to fry in hell forever. So, most people would figure that if it's reward and punishment, and I'm going to be punished, I might as well enjoy it. Eat, drink, and marry, lest tomorrow I die. So, I'll keep some of the mitzvahs, yeah. I'll do what I can do, but I'm only doing it because, if I don't, I'm going to fry in hell forever. Well, isn't that why anyone keeps the mitzvahs? Don't we realize there is reward and punishment? My Rebbe always says, he talk about the world to come, the next world, the spiritual world. I've asked him a number of times about certain things, and he said, I've never met anyone who's been there and come back. So then, being obnoxious, I would ask the question again. He's like, didn't you understand? I just spoke to you in English. I've never met anyone in that world that's come back. So, the spiritual world, we do know some things about it. But again, a lot of it is, especially living in a body in this world, is very clouded. Right? So, it's not so clear about it. So yeah, we believe that. And we believe there's going to be merit for what we do. But is that really why we're keeping it? Right, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Father, says, best way to keep Torah is to do it as if you're not receiving a prize. Because then you're doing it because you believe it's the right thing to do. Someone once said, well, when I die, I'm going 6 feet under. So I said, I hope for your sake, you're right. Because if I'm right, you're wrong, you're in big trouble. So this person asked, what would happen after 120 years? After 120 years, you find out that there is no reward. That's it, you die, finished. Like a dog, poof, nothing. Right? What happens when a dog dies? Nothing, dies. So what would happen? You spent all these years, learning and keeping kosher and keeping the holidays. And what's going to happen? You find out it's a big joke. That really it wasn't true. So I answered that, first of all, I think you're wrong. Right? First of all, I don't think what you're saying is true. But even if it would be, I didn't go into, all the proofs why I thought that, but I'm not going to go into it now either. Point is, I answered that even if that, God forbid, would be true, show me a better way and a better lifestyle that would be convincing to give meaning to people. And you would be very successful passing it down to the next generation. If you have a 97% success rate, that's pretty good. Right? That works. But it's 3%. That doesn't work. Well, let's go after the majority here. Right? In the secular world, when it comes to marriage, more than 60% end in divorce. If you live together, it's up to 70%. In the Orthodox world today, What is the percentage of divorce? Right? There aren't any hard statistics. Let's say for argument's sake, let's say it's 5%. I'll even grant, let's say 10%. Right? That's an exaggeration. Huge exaggeration. So if in that world, in the Orthodox Jewish world, that divorce is 10%, even if it would be that, but it's not even that high. Probably 3%, if that. Be that as it may, even if it was up to 10%. Now remember, someone saying, see, look, it's on the rise. You want to compare 10% to 60%? If something happens 10% of the time, if something happens 60% of the time, which one are you going to choose? Right? I mean, for the better. If Judaism, if within Orthodox Judaism 10% get divorced, and secular world 60% get divorced, we're not interested in having more people get divorced. So I take the 10%. Right? It's a much lesser percentage. It works. Now, you can give your own theories why it works. It's not we're not going to speak about the institution of marriage and why it should be successful, etc. In this case. But it works. You can pass it down. Right? In the ideal sense, it works. So, if it works, you have to go with it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Not interested in reasons in demography and sociology and any of these things. It's irrelevant. Doesn't work. I'm not saying throw out the system. I'm just saying the system is flawed. So in this case, even if you were to say, God forbid, after 120 years, we go poof, nothing happens. There's no afterlife, right? Soul dies, nothing happens. Is it a better life to live? Seemingly it would be. Family structure is much stronger in many ways. People are happier. No one says it's easy. It's an easier life. Right? That's why a lot of Jews aren't interested, because they, say it's hard. Right? It's not easy. That's true. No one said it's easy. Talking about meaning. 300 million people just watch the Super Bowl. That's life? That's what the world is? That's what life's all about? Halftime shows, commercials, $500,000 a minute, half a minute. But that's reality. So you say it's one day, it's one event, it's, again, if we're living our life or trying to the best of our ability, then these things don't matter. And they shouldn't matter. Just a distraction. Because at the end of the day, if we believe this is the real deal, if we believe it's true, beyond the shadow of a doubt, then that means everything else is fantasy. Doesn't mean I don't have an evil inclination, doesn't mean we don't fall, doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. There are plenty of things we do wrong. But at the end of the day, does what I do make me a better person or not? In the ideal sense. The ideal sense means if I would live according to the way the Torah wants me to, then yeah, then it works unbelievably. If I fail, and I do other things, yeah, it could look like the system, failed. That's not true. We're human. We make mistakes. We're part of this world. We have to live in it. But in the ideal sense, no other system gives as much meaning as Torah does. Especially if you live it. You live in a community that lives it, breathes it. That's how it gets passed down. Because it's loved, it's believed in. It's got precedent, previous generations. Not just making things up as we go along. So I want to take this idea one step further. My Rebbe here also brings out, when it says you give of your full heart, right? God wants money for the Mishkan from someone who's going to give with an overpouring, with an outpouring of his heart. Right? He's going to have a wide heart. He's going to have a wide heart to give. So it brings down that the Zohar says that before the sin of the golden calf, the Terumah, the money came for building the Mishkan, was brought also from the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav was the mixed multitude. That came out of Europe. Came out of Egypt. Right, been a long day here. Came out of Egypt, converted. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to take them out. God said, not a good idea. They caused the sin of the golden calf, etc. After the sin of the golden calf, Moshe says in the book of Exodus chapter 35 verse 1, Moshe gathered the people together from the community. It says Adas b'nei Yisrael, right? Vayakil Moshe es kol Yisrael, Vayakil Moshe es kol Adas b'nei Yisrael. Moshe gathered together kol Adas, all the people of the Jewish people, right? The community, really. The community of the Jewish people. Who is that coming to exclude? Who are we not including over here? The Erev Rav. We're not including the mixed multitude. So, after the sin of the golden calf, they weren't allowed to give. They didn't take money for the tabernacle from the mixed multitude. Comes along a Rav Agon, Ramosha Snyder, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. May his name be blessed. The famed head of the yeshiva of Rabbi Chaim in London. And he had a yeshiva during the war, during the Second World War. And the yeshiva was in dire straits many times. For food, for just sustenance, normal sustenance during the war. So Ramosha Snyder was prepared to suffer tremendous suffering even for the sake of the yeshiva, and he absolutely refused to take any money from people who didn't keep Shabbos. So why not? So you can look at it that if they didn't keep Shabbos, but they wanted to give money towards the yeshiva, and we know, as the Mishnah Perkei Avos says, ethics of our fathers tells us, mitzvah goreres mitzvah. Person does a mitzvah, it causes him to do another mitzvah. So if it causes him to do another mitzvah, maybe little by little, right, that'll have an influence, a positive influence, and he'll stop, not keeping Shabbos. We could look at it, in that sense, that would help them. On the other hand, if they're giving money for, let's say, a yeshiva, for an institution, and they have a part in it, they're like partners in it, well, the money that they give, now we may not see this directly, but the money that they give goes to the upkeep, goes to feeding students in the yeshiva. Now, if the money comes from people who don't keep Shabbos, right, they're not allowed to get benefit from that money. If someone has a business and it's open on Shabbos, if he's a Jew, he can't get benefit from that money. He's not allowed to. Not allowed to be open on Shabbos either. It's a different problem. But he's not allowed to get benefit even if he is open. So since they're giving money towards the yeshiva, it's also spiritual influence. Doesn't matter if the money's going to food, if the money's going for other things, right? It's using tainted money, so to speak, in the walls of the yeshiva. Now, if the walls of the yeshiva are supposed to be so holy, and students there are, learning day and night, getting to the truth of God's law, working on themselves to reach higher spiritual levels, and someone gives money from a impure place, gonna have an influence. Negative influence. So he absolutely refused to take money from people who do not keep Shabbos. So there was a group of rich Jews that wanted to sustain the yeshiva, but he was very concerned where their money came from. And the fact that, they could certainly well have been people who didn't keep Shabbos, and he refused. And even though the yeshiva suffered tremendously, it was it underwent a very difficult time. Nonetheless, he absolutely refused to take money from them. He made an agreement with a bakery that was owned by an Orthodox Jew that any bread left over they didn't sell, the next day someone from the yeshiva would come pick it up. So might say, God forbid, what is he, a wacko? People are starving, going under, very, very difficult times, suffering tremendously. These people could help. Not only was he willing to take their help, but they was in such dire straits, they even took food, they even took bread that didn't sell. Obviously it wasn't the freshest bread when they got it. But they made a deal, whatever was left over they would take. What was the result? Let's ask like that. Did the yeshiva have it easy? No. I don't know, too many yeshivas do have it easy, but this was even worse. Right? During war times, even worse. But what came out of it? What did the students look like coming out of this yeshiva? You have to understand. Moshe Schneider, Zeichel Tzadik Livracha, was a student of the Chofetz Chaim. Absolute Torah giant of that generation. Nothing to talk about. So his yeshiva produced unbelievable students. Right? Produced many, many Torah giants of the last generation, including Mori Varebi. Right? So my Rebbe learned by him. Right? Many, many stories I could tell, which I'm not going to at the moment. But Rabbi Schneider produced Torah giants, nothing to talk about. Many, many Torah giants. He knew how to teach. He knew how to educate. But more importantly, he knew what was important for the sake of the spiritual well-being of his students. To the extent he wouldn't let somebody who didn't keep Shabbos give to the yeshiva. So, I want to take one step back. So you might say, okay, this is a fanatical opinion. This is an opinion nobody holds by. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are two sides, right? We mentioned the other side. The other side is, if someone doesn't keep Shabbos, people will accept their money. Right? Institutions will accept their money. What's the rationale? Even though, really, the money comes from, if the money comes and they don't keep Shabbos, and yes, it could have a spiritual negative effect on people of that institution or whatever, at the end of the day, you're helping them. Because whatever they're doing in their life, they're getting the mitzvah. You're giving them a mitzvah. However much they give doesn't matter. So if we say mitzvah goreres mitzvah, if we say every time a person does a mitzvah can cause them to do others, have a spiritual positive influence on them, so why not take? Obviously we're not talking about, taking money from people, who are money launderers or other things, right? Or use it for crime or who knows what. That we're not talking about. Someone doesn't keep Shabbos. Right? We'll make it easy. Someone doesn't keep Shabbos. Obviously, someone involved in organized crime and they're donating thousands of millions of dollars, right? You don't want that money. Right? It's tainted money. Someone who doesn't keep Shabbos is also tainted money. In a major way. But it gives the ability for people to give. And if we give others the opportunity and they take it, it could be a merit for them. It could cause positive spiritual vibes. Cause them to want to do other mitzvahs. Guarantee? There's no guarantee. There's a probability. Right? The probability is if a person does something good, it can cause him to do other good things. The opposite is also true. If a person does something wrong, it can cause him to do other things wrong. Right? There's a spiral effect that goes on. Right? So the spiral effect for good and bad is always going one against the other. That's what goes on. But see, the more good we do, hopefully it offsets the bad. And hopefully it puts the bad at ease, puts it to the side, and makes the reality that I'm a much better person. No guarantee either. But we have to try. We have to start somewhere. So there are two sides here. Right? There are two sides. Right? The one side is you take even if they don't keep Shabbos. And the reason is because you're helping them. You're helping them. They have a merit. They're given a big merit in what they're doing. It may cause them to do other mitzvahs. May bring them all the way back. You never know. But you're giving them an opportunity. The other side is, no, not interested. Right? I'm not interested for one very simple reason. Right? The reason I'm not interested is because I want to keep the holiness together. I want to keep the holiness of the institution the same. I don't want negative influence. If I have negative influence, that's bad. So therefore, we don't let them do it. Because we don't let them do it, we run into that issue. And that's going to be a serious issue. Right? It's going to be a serious issue. And we'll do whatever it takes. In order to do that. So therefore, we won't take their money. And what will happen is we'll suffer more. But the money that does come in, and the money that does help, the money that does come in and help is going to be for the benefit of the yeshiva. Right? The benefit is going to be that the yeshiva itself stays holy. There's no unholy thing that goes in order that it's going to have a negative influence on the students. Right? So we'll go to great lengths and we'll suffer tremendously for the sole reason that we want the holiness to stay. And therefore, the influence will be so strong that the students it's going to produce, we can't even imagine. Right? And this is exactly what happened in his yeshiva. So that's one idea. The other thing I wanted to just speak about quickly, even though it's probably spend more time, but it says in verse 8, make a sanctuary for me, so I may dwell among them. Like everything I shall show you, the form of the tabernacle, the form of its vessels, so shall you do. So what does God say? God says, I want you to make a sanctuary for me. Why? So I may dwell amongst them. What is the purpose of the Mishkan? Right? What is the purpose of the sanctuary here? The purpose of the sanctuary, now it's hard to understand. Right? Because God says, I'm going to I want people to see me. I mean, obviously you can't see God and live, right? You only see him from behind, as the Torah says later. Nonetheless, God says, I will bring my presence down to this world. How that works, it's Kabbalah. Right? How God goes through all the spiritual worlds, it comes down, constricts his presence down to this, into this box, so to speak. Very, very difficult to understand exactly what that is. Be that as it may, why is he doing it? To be amongst you. Right? The idea is that God's presence should be here. So, we have a tremendous opportunity. When the temple was here, and the Mishkan was here, God's presence was felt. Right? The first temple, it's clear. God's presence. After the temple was destroyed, so we live now in Hester b'toch Hester Panim. Hester Panim means God's hidden. It's hidden within the hiddenness. We don't see that. All the things we see doesn't make sense what goes on. See, God gave the Jewish people an opportunity. The opportunity was, with all the miracles, Jews coming out of Egypt, splitting of the sea, the manna that fell, all these great opportunities to see God, that God intervenes in history. Right? That's what splitting of the sea is. Coming out of Egypt, that's what it is. Hashgacha pratis, divine providence. God interferes in history. True. God says, I'll even show my presence. I'll give you a glimpse of my presence. Of what that is. That's an amazing thing, something we have no idea what that is. We have no recollection today of what that is, because God's presence is hidden. Until the Messiah comes and the temple's rebuilt, we're not going to see that. Right? That's when you need the most amount of emunah, is when things look totally haywire and things don't make any sense. At the last second, God's going to bring the Messiah and everything's going to be great, but there's going to be a lot of suffering in the process. Be that as it may, God says, I want to be amongst you. I want you to feel what my presence is. So you say, okay, we're, more than 3,000 years later. More than 3,000 years later, we don't have any clue what that means. So what do we have left today? That even gives us a glimpse, a small glimpse of what that means. It's called a Beit Knesset. A Beit Knesset, or a shul, a synagogue, as it is really an offshoot of what the Mishkan was. Even though there was a temple, prayer still existed. Even though the Jews brought sacrifices, etc., to the temple, still there was prayer even in the communities, and eventually developed into the prayer services we have today, because the temple got destroyed. So there was no choice. It wasn't like prayer all of a sudden came into existence. Prayer was there, and then it got solidified after the temple, because there are no more sacrifices. So a synagogue is like what the temple was. It's a gathering place. And it's there to learn. People come to learn. Really, the temple is a place where, people sacrifice. They also learned. Kohanim taught. But that's exactly what a synagogue is. It's a place to come learn. It's a place to pray. It's a place to bring God's presence. So a synagogue, people give a lip service and go once, twice a year. It's a relic. It's a fossil. It's not bringing God's presence there. If you do things antithetical to Torah, it's a disgrace. Right? It's an absolute disgrace. It's not a social gathering. In some places, during the high holy days, that's what it is. You haven't seen people all year. People comment how you look and this and that. It's a place of prayer. To draw close. Now, prayer is a hard thing. No question about it. It's one of the three things, as Talmud says, always needs to be strengthened. But see, there are halachas, there are laws of what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do in a synagogue. The synagogue has holiness because of what it represents. It's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what the temple was. So be it. But that's what we have. So when you come, there's certain decorum. Right? You don't come dressed like you're going to a volleyball game. Or going to a ball game or who knows what. It's a serious place. Our goal is, if we're there during prayer, is to pray. Again, concentration may be difficult. Other things may be difficult. Doesn't matter. Our goal is to bring God's presence here. So, there are times we do a better job. Times we do a worse job. But keep in mind, we have no temple today. We're still trying to improve in order to rebuild what we haven't had in the last 2,000 years. Be that as it may, keep in mind one very important idea. And that is that God says, I want to come to this world. I want a place where people can see my presence, feel my presence. Okay, that's been destroyed. We can't do that now. Right, the next option is, okay, so we have a synagogue. All right, we come, we pray, we learn. Right, but there's another idea. God says, Asuli migdash v'shachanti b'soichem. Make me a migdash, a tabernacle, so I can dwell amongst you. Well, if we don't have one, and the synagogue's the next best thing, that's true. But you see, God can dwell amongst us when we do what we're supposed to do. When we make blessings, when we keep Shabbos, when we don't desecrate His name, when we sanctify His name, we don't push in line. You fill in the blank what we don't do or what we shouldn't do. Because if we do the opposite, people say, wow, thank God this person's a Jew. Thank God his father taught him Torah or his Rebbe taught him Torah. That's the ideal. We spoke last week a little bit about the idea of an Am Mamleches Kohanim. We're supposed to be a people of priests. We're supposed to be a priestly nation. See, but if people in the priestly nation steal and do other things, it doesn't make us look so good. Even if they're not the majority, it doesn't matter. We're held to a different standard, whether we want to or not. But if we do the right thing, and we're consistent with it, can unbelievable change of the world. On a personal level and on a global level. We have no idea what our actions do and how they can influence others. That's if we do the right thing. If we do the wrong thing, it's 10 times worse. So God says, I want a place where I can bring myself to you. But we can bring God here even without a place, through our actions. Through doing what He wants to do at the highest level. Right? We're not looking for mediocrity. We're not looking to rest on our laurels. Which I heard someone once say. I'm very happy where I am. That is spiritual death. Either you're going up or you're going down. If you want to be lukewarm, that's bad. Lukewarm doesn't do anything. Right? Eat something that's lukewarm. Doesn't taste as good. You want something hot or it's cold. Lukewarm, you don't go anywhere. So we have to try and do the best that we can on a regular basis, even though we may have downfalls along the way. But we have to make an effort. We can't just say, well, I failed at this, I failed at that, so I'm done. No. You can pick yourself up and you have to keep going. And if you made the wrong blessing this time, you make a new blessing. Right? You'll say it right. You won't make a mistake the second time. Right? There are many, many things we have to work on. No question. But the most important thing is you have to have the ratzon. You have to have the desire. As we said at the beginning, someone who gives, right, to the tabernacle has to have Yidvenu Libo, whose heart motivates him. Every day we have to be motivated. Even if we fail, even if we make mistakes, we still have to be motivated to want to change, to try. Because we don't know what the next day is going to bring. We may not be here the next day. Maybe too late. We wake up the next day, it's a new start. Doesn't matter what you did before. You want to go in that direction. That's the goal. And when we move in that direction, that's going to bring God's presence back down to this world. I also give conversion classes. Anyone interested in conversion or Noahide classes, take a look at Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism or Beyond Noahides on Facebook. I also have a blog at rabbichaimcoffman.blogspot.com, RABBIChaimcoffman.blogspot.com. Everyone have a great Shabbos.